Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Founders Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Trainer. I hope you're enjoying the new format. One of the key themes that has emerged through the early episodes is the challenge founders have of growing beyond their network. Today's guest had the same challenges. Tessa Court, who is the founder and CEO of IntelligenceBank, which is the leading digital asset management and marketing operations platform. They currently support over 400 brands, 350,000 users in over 55 countries. They also have over 50 employees now worldwide. I love Tessa's and IntelligenceBank's journey. Tessa had a problem when she was head of a global sales and marketing team and couldn't find a solution. So what did she do? She started a company to solve that problem. We spent the majority of the time discussing how she was able to scale IntelligenceBank beyond just her network and how to do it profitably. There's a lot of value in lessons from today's episode. We also discuss how your network runs out pretty quickly, how Tessa priced her offering early and how it evolved, the challenge of being a CEO of a tech company without having a technical background, why big logos, i.e. brands, can add credibility to your growth early on, plus so much more. As a reminder, if you listen to this podcast and enjoy it, please subscribe on your favorite platform and share it with your friends and colleagues that might enjoy it as well. Thank you for listening, and now on to the interview. Hey, Good morning, Tessa. Welcome back to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you. Thanks for getting up early, and appreciate you joining again. And as we talked a little bit before we hit record, really wanted to drill down into your first, what we call it, scaling experience, right? We have a lot of founders on here that talk about breaking through the $1 million mark. So I want to take you back in time a little bit through that journey and help us break that down. Before we do, can you share with the audience a little bit about what you and the folks at IntelligenceBank are working on today, how big you are, who you work with, all that good stuff?
Sure. So IntelligenceBank is a marketing operations platform, and we help marketing departments around the world not get fired and not get sued. That's basically what we do. So in other words, we have a series of tools such as digital asset management, marketing workflow, and marketing project management, and also online brand guidelines. And we basically help them manage online creative content management and creative governance. So just making sure clients and big brands can manage the content that gets produced and then gets approved and then gets distributed as well. So really putting a process around that. So just like a Salesforce would have Salesforce.com or a CRM system, marketing departments need a system of records. That's probably the best way to think about it.
And I know this has been a labor of love for you, right? And I think if I'm remembering right, I know you pivoted a little bit, but I mean, this was the core of what your idea was back in the early days, wasn't it?
Yeah, so IntelligenceBank has a lot of different products, so we still offer those other products, but this is the main one that's really taken off. So, I think when you're starting a business, you have lots of different ideas, and sometimes the market pulls you in different ways. But I think what's really important is that you stick with what you know. So before IntelligenceBank, when I was working at Hitwise, which was acquired by Experian, and that's how we met originally. I think that was about 1,000 years ago now.
It does.
I was head of global sales and marketing there, and I basically, when I started IntelligenceBank, I built the product I always wanted. So I think when you're starting a business, it's important to sometimes people go into brand new industries, and I think that's really a brave thing. But I think building something that you know and that you're really familiar with and you can resonate with the customers that you're selling to is really important.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and we'll pivot back to that in a second. But I think the what you mentioned about solving a problem that you had, right, is so important. And I'm just thinking about, you said 1,000 years ago. It's probably been at least a decade, is it? It's probably closing in on that.
12 years, yeah.
That sales and marketing, I know this is really more marketing related, but they struggled with this a decade ago, and yet it's still a big problem for a lot of companies that haven't got it under control. And sales and marketing alignment is still an issue that a lot of companies are facing. So it's crazy that we're still having this discussion today, but I guess that's why we're here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happening though, and really the problem that we're tapping into, and this really goes back into, when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to solve a business problem and create a company around that, is that you've got to tap into a growing market and a growing trend. And the growing trend that we saw and that we tapped into is digital content explosion. So 10 years ago, when I was running a global sales and marketing team, digital content was exploding. You had, different channels, search was happening, digital advertising was happening. Big brands had, a couple different agencies, personalization was starting. But fast forward now, the average marketing department has like over 200 projects going on at the same time. They've got 16 different agencies. I mean, it's mental. It's
Wow.
crazy. And so if you're a regulated industry on top of that, keeping track of everything is really, really hard. So it was difficult before. And with digitization and the requirements of personalization as well, in so many channels and so many demands on marketing as well, it becomes even harder. And that's the problem that we're solving. So I think, just kind of tying that back into, needs analysis and, when you're starting a company, it's a lot easier if you're starting a company in a growing industry and when the problem that you're solving is just exacerbating over time as well.
So that's a great segue back into it. So how did you know? You're like, you know what, this is a problem. I'm going to go start a company to solve this problem. How did you know what to do? Where did you start?
Well, I mean, I experienced it myself, but there's a lot of research out there. I mean, I think the other thing is that everybody has great ideas. So there's no shortage of ideas out there. And everybody, I remember when iPhones came out, everyone was like, oh, I've got a great idea for an app. Everybody had these great ideas at one point, but there's no shortage of ideas. But what's really important when you're coming up with an idea for a company is that the market that you're going into is growing, that, obviously the financials makes sense, and you can pull a team together to obviously go do it. And I think having the experience and being able to pull it off is also really important. One thing that I will share with you, and I was actually just talking about this with somebody the other night at a first post-COVID dinner party where we were allowed to actually have dinner with somebody outside your actual family here in Melbourne, Australia, was that we were talking about founding a tech company when you're not a technical person yourself, and the stress about that, where, if something breaks, you can't fix it yourself. And, one of the things he said was, how did you do that? And how did you, if it was just you and, you hired a dev to, or a dev or two to kind of build the product, how did you actually go about doing that? And, you start selling off the plan a little bit, and you create the prototype and you start selling it to a couple of customers, and you're, selling it to friends and family, and, you sell it to people you kind of know, and just start showing it around. But then once you get a couple of customers, it becomes real. And then you just hope those employees stay with you. And then in our case, an employee didn't stay with us and he left, and he said, I'm going to go travel the world, which is, fair enough. He's got a life
Good
to
for
lead.
you. You're right.
That's great. But then I'm, stuck with some technology that I can't fix if it breaks. So I think that becomes a major stress point. So when you are founding a business, when you're not a technical person and you're founding a tech business, making sure that you have a partner or a founder that is tied in with you to do that. Now it's not an issue. We have, a very large staff of 50 people who are, very technically confident that it's not, but at, early stages, it was something that was, that definitely, kept me up at night.
Definitely
But
stressful for sure. Now, in hindsight, do you think that ended up being a benefit? Because I could imagine if you're one of those doers, right, I could program and keep doing this, that maybe there would have been a different perspective on it than you having to articulate back to dev. I'm just curious, in hindsight, if you think there was some advantages to it, or nope, definitely go get the technical resource
well,
up front.
I think when we developed Intelligence Bank, we developed it from the user always first versus the technology. So it was always about what does the user want and how does it need to look and feel
Okay.
before, and then the technology kind of made it happen and then scaled it up. So that's how it was always developed, kind of from day one.
And like I said, now you're a global company and growing rapidly,
Yeah.
which
So, but from day, yeah, I guess when you're starting a company, it's a different, yeah, that's a different thing to consider.
And I want to go back to, because one of the themes I'm hearing through kind of the 2.0 version of the podcast, when I talk to the B2B founders and we talk about, getting beyond the $1 million mark or the 5% club. And, we talk a lot about first customers, and it's usually somebody in your network. I call it friends and family, but friends and family still have to have a need for what you're selling, right? Your service or product. Almost universally, though, everybody's like, that's where we got stuck, right? It got real once I had to sell to somebody that I didn't know. So I'd love, from your perspective, to, as you were starting to grow, getting some good traction, definitely starting with friends and family, what did you do next? How did you get beyond
I guess none of my family bought it because it was always enterprise. I guess when we started. So, but it was always people in our network. So people in our network were our first customers. So people we had, I guess, professional relationships before were our first customers. And we were lucky that they were larger businesses and larger enterprise businesses. So we had very good reference customers early on, which was great. So the logos, I think having big logos early on are important. So look, having a customer is important regardless, and a paying customer. And I think, one of the things that I was really proud of is that I think year one we were profitable because
That's awesome.
we sold off a plan, and we had customers who wanted to co-develop with us, and that's how we knew we had a good business, because we had a need that these big enterprise clients were willing to co-fund with us and were willing to, roll up their sleeves and make it work with us, which was really great. And I don't know if there's appetite for that necessarily now like there was then, but maybe there is. But I think what was great is that we just went for it. We didn't feel like we were small, and we didn't act small, and we acted big, and we were able to get those brands and those logos. And some of those brands are still our clients today, and we still have very healthy relationships. And it's funny. So sometimes when I'll go and talk to the CMOs at those companies today, I will still thank them, and I will still acknowledge, I was like, you were the reason why we are successful and why we're here, because you backed us from day one. We will forever be grateful for that. But I think it's the big logos get big logos, and that experience does that. So I would say that, the bigger you can get early on, the better. And it took, I guess, for our first million, I think it took like 3 years to do that.
Okay.
To kind of that, it took some time, going from air, like an idea, to, first million. And we didn't have funding for, at least until year 2 or, 2 years on. So we didn't have, proper funding or anything. So it took some time to do that. But there's a lot of hustle and lots of meetings and a lot of coffees, but we got there, and kind of haven't looked back, and we still have the first customer we ever sold. So
that's awesome. And just even tying into that, one of the questions I like to ask is, how did you know how to price it, right? You're solving a problem that nobody's really solved before. And so, it's a big problem. You had the problem, but were you guessing when you went in with first pricing, or how'd you figure?
Pricing's a funny thing. I think pricing is something you're always tweaking. And I think pricing, especially with enterprise software, it's something you're always playing with. And it's our pricing, what it was, 8 years ago, is so different from what it is now. It depends on the size of the company. It depends on so many different variables. But, I think you just put something out there, and, and obviously depends on your costs as well. But I don't think anybody ever gets it 100% right at all times. So you just have to, figure it out as you go.
And when you started with your product, was it a reoccurring revenue model or a license? I'm trying to remember back in your early days how you approached the market with it.
So it was really interesting. When we launched the company, we set out to always be two things. Firstly, always SaaS, so always deliver through SaaS, and to be global from day one.
Interesting.
So I think we had our first international client within the first year.
Which is interesting, because you didn't necessarily have the resources and the talent and the folks around the world to support that. So it's a bold idea. I mean, it's really interesting, and obviously it paid off. So I guess my follow-up question is that you obviously got some good traction. You raised some money. Had you started selling? I guess go back. When did you start selling beyond your professional network and starting to reach, folks that maybe you didn't know, or what was kind of the strategy to get beyond that first wave, if you will?
Your network runs out pretty quickly. So I think after year one, that ends, and you start investing in marketing after year one. And you look, year one is, I think, you're building your product, and you're using your network to get feedback on your product, and that's the most important thing. You can have honest conversations like, would you even use this? Would you even buy this? And those are the sorts of questions. And it's really funny. One of my best friends now, we actually weren't even very close at the time. I just had known this woman from kind of a business networking thing, and I had talked to her. She never bought Intelligence Bank, but we met through that, and we just
Okay.
became very good friends. And I said, would you even buy this? And how would you, and we met through that, kind of through that process. And I just asked, I was just very frank, and I didn't want people to tell me what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear the truth about it, because hearing what I wanted to hear would have been, not helpful, I guess.
Right.
Hearing the truth would have been, was what I needed. So I guess after year one, we started actively marketing. So we did, coming from a marketing background, I do believe in the power of advertising and marketing. So we did spend money in search and online marketing, and then started to get leads in the door, and then, just kind of took off from there. But I guess the point is that the friends and family, when you are starting out, that whole strategy that has a very short runway, and you have to start, and you do not have a real business until you start selling to people you don't know.
Yeah, it was funny. I had a guest on the other day, and now I'm drawing a blank who had said it, but he said, "Yeah, the dollars don't count till you sell it to somebody you don't know." Right? It's all good and well, and I think there's some really good advice in there for these, first time founders or founders looking to scale their business for the first time. Leverage that network, not just to get some revenue coming in, but validate. I had a guy who actually went through the Shark Tank process, right? And he invented a product, and he wanted his network to be brutally honest with them about what they like, what they don't like, and tell me, because if you won't tell me, nobody's going to tell me, and I'm not going to get to where I need to go. So I think that's really an overlooked aspect of it,
Yeah.
especially when you're so busy, right? You're trying to do everything to try to get out, but take the time to listen to your customer.
Yeah. And sometimes things are, and I think with some ideas, it's not that the idea is bad, but it's just sometimes it's not commercial.
Right.
Sometimes with I'm very generous with my time with new entrepreneurs, because people did that for me when I was first starting out. So if people have a question or want to run an idea, and not that I am the expert in all things business, but I've kind of
Hey,
been
you
there,
made it.
and yeah, I've done some things right. And, I'm happy to share thoughts with people sometimes. And, sometimes I think the issue is, like, to run a successful business, you have to have a lot of things go well. So part of it is timing. So you've got to have the right business at the right time. Part of it is the model. So how are you delivering it? So I guess it's the 4 P's of marketing as well, but you've got to have the right way of delivering it as well. You've got to have the right price point. So there's got to be a lot of things. So you might have, like, the best idea in the world, but you can't get it to market, or you can't sell
Right.
it, or there's a lot of things you got to get right. And so I think that's where a lot of businesses struggle, and figuring out that fit is, kind of tricky at the start. And that's what you got to really work on and nail early on to break that $1 million mark.
Yeah, that's so good. And, it's funny, my less articulate way of saying it is your product a need to have product or a nice to have product? And I think you
Yeah.
can get some nice traction, no pun intended, when the markets are good and business is going well and people are like, oh, yeah, that's interesting, I'll buy this. But in the times we're in now, they're going to go to the products that they need to have versus the nice to have. And at least my experience has been there's less time spent on kind of validating that with either customers or market to make sure that again, you can build a really nice business, and we're not saying the end all be all is to scale it beyond $1 million, but a lot of people do want to build a business. And if you do, these are some of the fundamental things you should be thinking about before you get too
Hmm.
far down the road, right?
And I think the other thing that happens is that, you read in the media all the time, oh, so and so is 22 years old and they built a $20 million business in 2 weeks. And everyone has this time pressure, but it takes time to build great businesses. Like, Jeff Bezos did not build Amazon in 2 minutes, it's extraordinary what he's built over,
Sure.
20 years or whatever it's been. But it takes time to build businesses. It takes time to figure things out. It takes time to build a great team. It takes time to build technology. And that's just the reality of things. And so I think people and entrepreneurs especially get really hard on themselves as well. Oh, I haven't cracked this milestone in, 3 weeks and
Right.
sky's gonna fall in. So, I think people need to give themselves a bit of a break as well.
Yeah. And what's your advice to folks? Because there's a fine line between perseverance and maybe it's not the right idea. And I know there's no one answer to it, but how would you recommend to people to kind of straddle that line?
Yeah, I'm very milestone driven. I think of everything in terms of quarters and think about, I need to achieve or I need to get to certain places within a quarter. So you think about your business in terms of, people, product, financials, sales, whatever it is. And then you need to basically do these three things on each one. And that's it. Like there's all this other noise and there's all these other things that you have to do. And if you can focus on that and just get to the next milestone, because there's so many things you have to do running a business and you can get completely overwhelmed. But if you just focus on those things quarter by quarter, and then when you do get stressed out, you just look at your little spreadsheet, you say, oh, no, I'm doing that next quarter. I don't have to, solve the problems of the world right this second.
Right.
It calms you down. But then also you can see, if it doesn't, and then I guess if you're struggling with the business, you can also see that pretty clearly.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And again, I'm more of a metrics and numbers driven anyway. So having kind of that dashboard and the numbers don't lie. So if you don't fool yourself with, oh, if only 3 more customers would have bought, we would have got to, X, Y, and Z. And I get it. I mean, there's the number of folks that I've had that, I'm a 3-year overnight success or a 10-year overnight success. And I do think it's got to be in your DNA to persevere, but it's really making sure you get to the right idea. And kind of the combination I've seen is the folks that just kind of miss on one of the 4 areas that you talked about, or just don't make the investment into the next level of the marketing, or bringing in the wrong people and not investing in the right areas. And again, it's super small sample size, but the majority of folks, I said, well, we're to this point, we need to start to scale. I'm going to hire, 4 salespeople or bring in 4 marketers. And maybe that's the right idea, but again, it's a math equation, right? I mean, marketing is still a math equation. You're going to see where the demand's going to come. So, as you cross through that threshold, what's kind of your advice or recommendations of, all right, I can't do any more myself, right? I'm at the max point. And if I want to grow this business, I'm going to have to make investments. So where, maybe 1, what did you do? And 2, what's maybe your recommendation to folks as they're getting to that point?
Yeah. So, I think to be a good CEO for a startup, you have to be a multitasker and you have to be good at a lot of things. So you've got to be able to do a lot early on, or recognize the skills that you don't have and bring people in early on. I mean, that is very, very clear. I probably, in hindsight, tried to do too much myself and didn't hire other experts early on, sooner, which I'm doing rapidly now, and it's paying dividends, which is great. And we have a very deep management bench now, and it's really funny when you're sitting on Zoom calls now with COVID and everything else. I just sit there and look at my management team on the Zoom because you can see them all there, all 12 of them, and I'm just kind of in awe of them. I'm just like, it's just the dream team, and it's amazing to see them all doing their thing. And I can't even imagine our business without them. And I just think, gosh, if I had those people 2 years before or 3 years before, imagine where we would have been. But, that's hindsight and that's 2020 and things like that. But I think hiring the good managers early is really important. Where you make mistakes is when you hire people who are not impact players in a startup. And that is what I think is the problem, whether they're a whether they're just a I guess, a team member or a manager. In a startup, you need people who are going to make a difference. So people who are just warming seats are a problem, I find. I think people who are going to drive the business forward, who are going to bring ideas, who are going to push things forward are the people that you need.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. And I think I've heard it as, we have unicorn products and companies, but I think those employees, that's kind of a theme I hear quite a bit. I've got somebody that can do a lot of stuff early on is what you need, but then folks also struggle with, all right, now I'm starting to bring in, a full management team. I had this person that was really good. Is he or she now able to step into one of those management positions, or how do I manage? I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? But
Yeah,
it's not an
totally.
uncommon tale.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's
But I
interesting.
think
So,
when you get, I guess coming back to your 5%ers and like $1 million, I mean, $1 million is still, it's obviously your company will survive usually if you kind of get to $1 million and you've gotten to a threshold, but it's still not a ton of money. It's not like you can afford to go out and hire a full management team. It's not like huge, but it's at that point where you probably need a finance person, or you probably need
right.
sales. You probably need that one additional senior management person. And depending on what your skills are, you probably need to hire the management skills that are completely opposite to yours. That's what I would.
Makes sense. Yeah, complements it. And, one of the things I've been hearing more and more is people becoming more accepting of a fractional type of a C level as startups are starting to grow, right? The old thinking was I need somebody here full time, 100% committed. And I get that, but it sounds like there may be an opportunity when you get to a certain threshold to bring in that expert in this area to help you drive that business, even if it is on a part-time. I'd love to get your perspective on that and where do you think it's heading?
I don't really know. I mean, everybody who works at Intelligence Bank is pretty committed, and we kind of all live and breathe it and love it and love working with each other. And I mean, I actually can't imagine having somebody part time on our
Oh,
management
interesting. Okay.
because it's so engulfing. And you know we're on the phone with each other on weekends and talk, just because we love it and we're talking about it. And it's not because I mean, I just, there's so much to do also, and there's so many challenges, fun and not so fun, and whatever we need to get done, that yeah, I can't visualize us having somebody part-time. I think there might be some part-time roles, but not from a management perspective. Not for, and we're growing. Last year we grew 60%. So
Awesome.
we can't, we're on a rocket ship. We don't have the capacity, and we're, well past that stage, that earlier growth stage anyway. But even at early growth, I mean, we were growing like 150%, when we were much smaller. So we didn't have the ability to have part-time anything. Like
Okay.
we were kind of, we weren't able to do that at the
Yeah,
time.
it's interesting. And again, I'm just asking from, it's a newer trend that I've been hearing, and I haven't heard any
Yeah.
success stories yet. And it seems like it's a little counter to, I mean, I get it from an enterprise where you could bring somebody in to help maybe
Yeah.
realign, but maybe a
I think
newer version.
there might be some roles, like I think maybe like a CFO role, like if you're not
Okay.
ready to have a full-time CFO, like, and you need that expertise, if you're capital raising or something like that, you might be able to
Maybe.
do some roles like that that might be workable, or even like security or things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even then, it may not even be a CFO type of role, right? It may be very specific to a project or for tasks. So then you led me right into the next question. So thank you. Is culture, right? And I know we're starting to run low on time, so I want to be respectful of that. But obviously, you just said the 50 plus people that work for you all love to be there. How do you build that in early on? Is it just from a management style? Was it hiring? How, is there a secret sauce to it? And, I just would love your perspective to, again, founders that are looking to scale, bring in complementary people. But as I start to bring on full-time employees, is there some best practices you'd recommend?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'd say I hope they love to be there. I mean, that is my number one wish. I don't know if they all love it, but I do. That is like my number one wish, that I hope they do. Culture's a funny thing. I think culture needs to come from the bottom, not from the top. I think culture has to be set. The tone has to be set from the top, in the sense that it has to be value driven. And I think management and me as the CEO and the founder has to set the values of the company, and the values and we have to live by our values and have to be transparent about our values, and we have to live our values. So they can't just be a poster on the wall and say, our values are be nice to each other. It's got to be, and we have to reward our values, and we've got to acknowledge them and bring them and figure out ways to bring them to life. We are not one of those companies. We're not like the kombucha on tap, beanbag in the corner type startup at all. Like, that's not us. We're kind of like a big family that's kind of dorky. Like,
okay, I like it.
That's kind of probably more our company culture. But it's very like family that likes to eat a lot, and it's, slightly quirky and dorky is probably the way you would describe our company culture. But it has to do about shared values at the end of the day. And so if somebody doesn't have, and so it's very diverse, like ethnically, age group, everything. It's like, it's crazy, like the diversity there. But if somebody doesn't have a shared value and is mean or is, highly political or whatever it is, they don't last very long at Intelligence Bank. And so we weed those people out pretty quickly because we know that that is a culture killer. And there's not a lot of time for that behavior at Intelligence Bank. And then the other thing that we're pretty passionate about is that, I guess, the fun activities that we do at Intelligence Bank, they never come from me.
Oh,
Firstly,
interesting. Okay.
I'm boring is the first thing.
No.
Nobody probably wants to do what I want to do anyway, but they always come from just random people, and they're never organized like, oh, today we're going to have beer pong, or, it's never like that. It's always from somebody will just organically say, we're going to do this. And it's usually this like kooky, like kind of left of center idea that's just random, that is hilarious, and everybody just gets on board with it and loves it. And it's awesome and fun. And, like our Christmas party was like Italian summer, 1970s. And we went out to this like Italian mansion and played like bocce and dressed up like 1970s summer, like stuff
That's
like that.
awesome.
Like it's just random. But what I love about it is that it's not like a social committee, or it's not this one person who does. It's just organic, and it comes.
Yeah.
And my only job is to fund it, and I'm happy to do it
And show up, right? And participate.
Well, I'm happy to, because it's super fun, but I love that
Yeah.
it comes from different people, and I love how different groups of people just come up with things, and it just happens, and that's what's great about it.
Yeah. Let me just ask you one follow-up on that before I get to my last two questions. But
Yeah.
on the, we talk about the values and sticking to and developing. Was that an early on? When I started the company and we started to grow, here's the things that are important to me and what I want important to the company? Or was it as you started to bring more employees on? Did you, I'm asking because at some point, as a founder, do I need to be, here's my values today as I'm starting this company? Or is it something that kind of morphs and grows and you
I
better
think
figure it out before you hire too many people?
it was that. I think we figured it out before we hired too many people. So I
Okay.
think we had about 6 or 7 people, we put them together. There was a very small group of us, and we put them together, and they just kind of, and for a while they were the poster on the wall that we did nothing with. And,
Right.
as we grew and as we had more people and we had people in different offices, it was just more and more important that we brought them to life, and we made them, important to our staff, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters is our people. You can build the best technology in the world, but if you don't have the people to build it, to sell it, to service our customers, it's kind of
Yeah.
irrelevant.
No, I get it. I think I wish more companies would, learn, at least some of the older enterprise and legacy companies they're trying to take lessons from folks like you and growth companies, but it's really hard to change a culture of an organization. So no, that's awesome. And so one last question on the business, and then I'll get to my final question is, what's next for you and Intelligence Bank? What do you guys, I know we're still in
Yeah,
the middle of COVID, but what's on your
yeah.
guys' radar?
So we're most likely going to be doing another capital raise. So we haven't raised in a while. Like, we're profitable, but it's really for us going to the next stage as a business. So that's probably on the cards for us probably next financial year. We'll be looking, I think once this COVID thing hopefully settles itself out, if it ever does, that'll
Yeah.
be next us, and just continue to build, I think for us, it's to be, we're a very product driven company. I think sales has been a very big focus for us to prove, to continue that growth trajectory. We're going to continue on that product path and continue to, grow out, our enterprise product capability to continue to win bigger sales and things like that. So I think it's that product, just continue to really invest in our product roadmap is, on the cards for us.
Awesome. And try to get back to some sort of normal, right? Yeah, it sounds like Australia is much further along than we are here in the US. So and I'm glad you clarified that the dinner party was in Australia, and and depending on what state you're in the US, that would cause an uproar. So
exactly.
All right. So in closing, and this drill, it's still my favorite question is, what is one thing that you would highly recommend? And it could be, personal, professional, just what's something that's, top of mind for you that you think other people should be, thinking about?
I think when you're running your own business, it's completely self-absorbing and totally time-consuming. It's all you think about. So just taking time out to read a book and to do something different, because you can just think about your own business all day long because you love it, passion project. And it's really, really important to do something else once in a while, and just to take a break.
Are you reading anything exciting you'd want to recommend?
No, I'm just working on the business. No, I am reading The Pilgrim right now, and I'm absolutely loving it. So it's been around for a while, but yeah,
awesome.
So I'm loving it right now.
Well, Tessa, I really appreciate your time in part 2. Again, all sorts of value, and I appreciate you taking some time early out of your morning. And if folks want to reach out and learn a little bit more about you or connect with you, what's the best way for people to do that?
Just on LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Awesome. And I will share that in the show notes, and, maybe we'll check back in with you in another 12 months after another raise, and, we'll check your progress to that next level.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so
Awesome,
much.
Tessa. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thanks.
Have a good day.